Good thing it's a long start of the event. I love that. Yes,
Oh,
I lost my
so
question.
welcome to Wife of Ministry. And for those of you who actually like have never, I don't know what you see on the other end, but Debbie pushes a button every time that says, start event, and it is the death grip of Black Circle just going and going and going, and we never know when it's actually going to go live. So that is what we were laughing at. But anyway, welcome to Wine for Bet Street. Happy
Yes,
Monday, everybody. Happy
and it
Monday.
truly has been a Monday.
It has been.
It truly has.
It's been a long one. It's been a long one. Wine is definitely needed. Um, but for today, we are at the letter of the day is Q, and we tried hard. We tried hard, but we really couldn't find anything because we did Côte de Chambre last season, so we didn't want to repeat that. And then that is pretty
Well, I
much
have to say that was kind of tough.
yeah, yeah, that was a
Yeah,
tough one in
so
its own
we
right.
did get a question on what was the toughest,
Topic, right?
research, and I would say going back through my notes, I believe so.
That was a tough one, but it was a
Yes.
fun one. It was fun.
Mhm.
But so I think we're going to just stick with every time we get to the letter Q, each new season, it is going to be customer or consumer questions. Okay,
Yes.
so questions. So what we did this episode is we reached out to our social media and asked people to supply us with some questions. So that is what we are going to be talking about when we get into it. But for once, I'm actually remembering that we need to introduce ourselves.
Okay. So I'm Debbie Giaquindo. I'm the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. I'm a wine blogger and wine writer under Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. I'm the author of a book, Tapping the Hudson Valley, Day Trips and Weekend Itineraries Through the Hudson Valley. I'm a certified specialist of wine and a wine location specialist in Port and Champagne. And in May, I'm opening up a restaurant in North Wildwood, New Jersey called Trio North Wildwood. And I don't know if I left anything out, but if I did, I'll think about it.
There we go.
I'll
We'll add it.
say,
We'll
oh,
just
wait a second. I got that.
we'll add it. We'll add it later. So,
Yep.
and I am your co-host, Lori. My husband and I own Dracena Wines in Paso Robles, California. I can be found on the social media under both Exploring the Wine Glass and Dracena Wines. I am a UC Davis winemaking graduate. I am Som Day certified. I am Champagne, excuse me, specialist, and WSET level 2 certified. And I remembered them all. And before we even get into our video, I'm drinking because it's
All
been
right.
that
Yeah.
Monday.
So am I. I'm waiting. I'm drinking a Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley.
All right. And I am drinking, all right, I'm drinking, da-da, the very first time seen in public.
I cannot wait to get my lips on that.
Dracaena wine Chenin Blanc. And the only really reason why I'm drinking this tonight is because I opened it last night to do tasting notes for this and the new Coeur d'Alene Rosé. So it was tasting notes night last night. So that is what I am drinking. And are we ready for Elmo?
We're ready for Elmo.
All right, let's see if we can get this to work.
A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O P Q R S T U V W X Y and Z. Now I know my.
Well, it didn't have an
Here we go.
echo. It didn't have an
Yeah.
echo. we're we're gonna have to write Webinar Jam and ask them why that happens. But anyway, I'll just add that into the podcast like I always do.
Yeah.
So anyway, welcome, welcome, welcome. Like I said, letter of the day is Q4 questions.
All your questions.
Yes, and I'm going to start off with the question that Michael has asked in the chat.
Yes,
and
I see that too.
okay, so
And it's actually a good question because I think it's really what's the value of it? I think it's a personal thing and where you want to go in the wine industry with it.
I agree with that. For my realm, I wanted to do the WSET to see the wine world from the other side, not from the industry side, right? So I have the UC Davis winemaking degree, so I know winemaking. I wanted to see it from the other side. Plus, WSET is the world, regions and things like that. So I definitely think it's all your personal drive. How much education do you want? Do I think WSET gives me anything? Street cred? In some areas, I think people look at the WSET and, you get that street cred for it. And there are different levels. So the higher you go up, I think the more credit you get for it. WSET level 1 is very, very basic. I think it's a day class. WSET level 2 was 9 weeks. And then WSET level 3 is 9 weeks, or it might be even 11 weeks, but then there's a tasting component. And then you have the diploma. And, that's years of studying. So that's how like
I said, it's how what you want out of it. So I did the certified specialist of wine designation through the Society of Wine Educators. And when I looked at the two of them, basically, I didn't have the time at that point in my life to go into New York City for the amount of time for the WSET. So I chose the CSW where I could go drive an hour after working full time, and it was just an hour, drive and come back. So, and, I'll never forget my class when I walked in and there was like 20 people and I'd say 80% of them were all like taking it for the second or third time. I'm like, holy cow, I'm never going to pass. And I passed on the first time. So,
yeah, I think the CSW is, I think, difficult, very difficult. The WSET level 1, I think, has like a 99.9% accepted, a pass rate.
Yeah.
It's literally just very, very basic stuff. The WSET is like 65%, I think, and level 2. And then level 3, it drops even further. And then the diploma, it drops even further. So, they're asking you for more and more knowledge. I personally am thrilled that I did the WSET because it opened my eyes to a whole bunch of areas that I didn't know. You study the wine regions and you study the wines that come from it, and it puts the big picture of the world together. Do I use it? Not at the moment, but the knowledge is up here, and they can't take that away from
I
me.
have to say the knowledge, even in the CSW, I mean, when you can speak, it's almost like another language sometimes, wine. Like, you look at Vouvray, like we were talking, Vouvray beforehand. The average consumer does not know that Vouvray is Chenin Blanc.
Right.
So you can decipher certain things and just, the things that I tell the customers at the restaurant when they come in with a bottle of wine and I'm opening it and it's, something off the beaten path. And I'm like, oh yeah, and I start talking to them. They're like, how do you know?
Right. Yeah. It's all for what you want in your head. Yeah,
it would be on what you want to get out of it. Is it something that you want to do? Is it something, and why do you want to do it? Do you want to gain a better knowledge of just wine in general, wine of the world? And
right.
the regions and the terroir and the grapes and the growing seasons and things like that.
Right. And I think that for, like I can get a job as a sommelier and not have gone through sommelier,
Right,
not go further than what I've already done per se,
right,
right? So, because if I'm on the floor selling wine, I'm a sommelier. Now, I didn't go through advanced schooling to be a sommelier. I don't have the education title of sommelier, but if I'm on the floor selling wine, a sommelier. So I think all of these education things, I think that's exactly it. It's like going to graduate school. Do you want to go to graduate school to learn more, or you're good where you are?
right.
You know,
So it's really, I think, a personal
right,
decision and what you want to get out of it and what you want to do with it.
right, absolutely.
You know.
All right, Deb, you have a question for us?
So let's see here. Let me bring up the questions that were asked. Okay. So here I have a question that came from someone about rosé.
Okay.
Okay, so the different methods of rosé, and they get all confused on it when they see like the Sanjay method. You
Right.
know, they want to know what exactly is it, how is it different from just regular rosé and how it's produced. Um, so that was really their question.
Okay, so technically there are three ways to make rosé. The first one is mixing a white wine with a red wine, literally white wine and red wine. That is not very common, but that actually is the way it is done in many areas. Even in main rosé areas, there are some areas that do that. It's just not common around the globe. Okay. The second method is saignée. Saignée method means, by translation, saignée means bleed. Okay, so you're bleeding, and that's exactly what a saignée rosé is. So how I explain it is that you're getting two wines from one grape. So
Exactly.
the red grape is going to come in. I'm picking that grape to be a red wine. So as the winemaker, I'm picking that grape to be a red wine, which is very different. What I'm doing then is I am pressing the grapes to get the juice off of the skins. And then that juice that comes out is going to be colored. I'm going to take that juice and I'm going to sell that as a rosé. What that does scientifically is give me more skin exposure to less juice. And that's where the color of the wine comes from. So now that I have less juice and more skins, I'm going to have a deeper colored red wine. I'm going to be able to have
So let me ask you a question here, though, with that. So you press it for the red wine. Don't you leave it in the bin longer for
right.
the
That's what I'm
contact?
saying. Right.
Right.
So I have more skin, less juice, and that's what
Okay.
I let sit there. And
For the
that
red wine.
for the
Gotcha.
red wine, and
Yeah.
then that
I just
red
want to make sure we're
wine
on the same page.
that red wine is going to be a deeper color. It's going to be a fuller red wine. Okay, it's going to be that deeper, darker color. So I'm getting my red wine and my rosé. Okay, that's saignée, to bleed. Okay, you cut yourself. It's a saignée. Okay, the other way is called direct press, or the third way is called direct press. Okay, direct press is a completely different process in the fact that I'm picking my fruit to be a rosé. Okay, so Dracaena Wines is a direct press. So when we pick our fruit, we are picking that fruit earlier than we would pick it to be a red wine. So this year's Coeur d'Alene is Grenache and Tempranillo. That was picked at a earlier time in the season than if we were creating a Grenache or a Tempranillo red. Okay, so the acid level is different, the ripeness level is different. I'm going to pick that at that higher acid, and then I'm going to let it sit on the skins, and I'm going to press it. When it has the color I want, I'm going to press it off, and there's my rosé. And now all of those grape skins, that pomace, is done. I don't make wine with it. I'm pressing the juice off to make the rosé. So all I have left is the solids, the pomace, and that pomace basically goes back to the vineyard, as compost.
And that's why some rosés are so many different color shades,
Right.
because it depends on how long they soak it, and then it's a winemaker's decision based on what they're trying to achieve. And that's why you'll have some that are just like real pale, like salmon with a touch of like pink in it. And then you got the ones that are more
Darker
more
red.
pink. Yeah.
And then and like you said, it's up to the winemaker what style they're looking for. Do we want to, what are you looking for in that? Our rosé this year is pale. It is such a pretty color, and that's the winemaker's choice. We could have let it sit on skins longer, and then it's going to be a darker color. So
Right.
so that's three ways to make a rosé.
So you got a question?
I do. So I got asked, how should I store my wine? What should I pay attention to?
Good question.
You want to start that? Tackle
think,
that?
it's got to be in a dry place where there's no sunlight, so you can't have the sunlight interfere with the wine. Humidity controlled. It's got to, because you don't want it to spoil, to get too hot, and it should be temperature controlled too, where it's not going to get extremely hot. I mean, not everybody can afford to buy these really nice, wine cellar things that are temperature controlled, but in a cool part of your house, like a basement with a dehumidifier going, for people that, need a place, I think that would be good. But you really don't want any sunlight coming in. You don't want the wines to get a hold of any of that, because that can really affect it. You don't think so, but you don't know how the sun is hitting that bottle and the whole temperature thing.
Right.
So what do you think?
I agree. Temperature is a big thing. And the interesting thing is that it's not so much the overall temperature. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. First of all, the majority of wine is purchased in today's world is drunk in 72 hours. So it doesn't matter where you store it. I mean, don't store it on a windowsill where it's 95 degrees outside and the sun is hitting it, obviously, But if you're drinking it in 3 days, 72 hours, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're talking, these questions are usually for wines that you're going to store for a while, okay? So the temperature is not as significant as the variations. You don't want that wine to go from 60 degrees to 80 degrees and fluctuate back and forth. That's very bad for the wine. It's much worse than if the wine is just at 80 degrees, okay? We don't want to have wine at 80 degrees all the time, but it actually is worse to fluctuate. And a way you can tell if a wine has been stored and that has been fluctuated, as the temperature changes in a wine, the volume of wine in that bottle changes. So if you get a wine that the cork is raised a little bit, it's not flat, that's an indicator that it probably had some sort of heat or temperature variation. Okay, so that's one way to do it. So we want to keep those temperatures stable. As Debbie said, no sunlight. You also don't want it to be near vibrations. So I don't know who's going to store their wine on top of their washing machine, but that's not a good thing. Okay, so you want to keep it where there's no vibrations, where it's a constant temperature, a consistent temperature. As Debbie said, the humidity, and you do want to lie it down. You want to lie it down so that the wine can be in contact with that cork so that the cork doesn't shrink. And then if the cork shrinks, it's going to come in and then oxygen gets into the bottle and the wine gets oxidized. Okay? Now, the variations in temperature Or I should say that's bad, but like just keeping the temperature at like, let's say 75, right? Instead of the 55 or instead of the 65, right? What that does is cut down on the the ageability of the wine. So if the wine was going to be okay for, let's say, 20 years, if you're keeping it at a higher temperature, you're backing that down. It's no longer going to be good for 20 years. You know, you're looking 18, you're looking 16, you're looking 15. So that's what the higher temperature does. But again, much worse to be this way than just a constant temperature. So
I also want to add, like, for people that get wine deliveries, whether it's wine clubs or you're ordering wine online, when that wine comes in, you want to store it on its side for at least a week before you even open it. Because just,
travel
when you
junk.
travel, you kind of get like all, disheveled. So does the wine. So you want to just let it rest for at least a week before you open it.
Right. And then Michael is asking about finding 25
Screaming.
cases of Screaming Eagle. Well, you know what, Michael? First of all, as soon as you find that, you can invite Debbie and
Invite us
Brian
over.
over. But in terms of finding that, my best recommendation is to go to, to a house,
I would say a wine
benchmark.
auction.
Yeah, like a wine auction or a benchmark.
Ackers.
Yeah.
We did that for Wine Studio, the Ackers auction in New York City,
Yes. Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. So I would say that, uh, benchmark, Zacky's, J&L. No, not J&L. That's my storage warehouse. J&J. No, J and something or another.
J and
Um,
K, they're out of
yeah,
Chicago,
yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. J&L is where we store our case goods. Yeah, so I would go there. And they'll know where
I
to
would check
go.
out Acker auctions because they
Yes.
probably would have them.
Melissa May in New York, a house like that. Okay. All right, Deb, got another question?
I do. I was asked, I purchased a bottle of Chardonnay one year, and the next year I purchased the same bottle, different vintage. Why do they taste different?
Mother Nature.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Different growing seasons. And I always tell people when, you know, don't, because you don't like it, one year, don't not go and taste it the following year. Like if you go to a winery and stuff, because the growing season affects the grapes so much. Where you have a banner year, you're going to have a incredible wine. And the next year you might get a hurricane right before you're picking. So the grapes are filling up with water. So you're going to have a lighter, more diluted type of wine. And it's just an effect of the growing
Right.
season.
Or because it's going to rain, you have to harvest earlier than you typically would harvest.
Right.
So in a red wine, you're going to have a wine that is a little bit more green because
Mhm.
it's not as red. So as Debbie said, don't give up after one vintage. Although I will say, if you taste it and it's a not corked, because corked is something different, but it's just technically not a sound wine. Well, that's probably you might not want to go back to that winery.
You
But
will know. You will know that because
yeah,
that will be,
yeah,
strong.
corked
But
corked is a whole different story.
but
Uh,
if if it doesn't meet your expectations the following year, it really could be the growing season.
yeah.
And I would ask, if you're in a winery tasting, those are questions to ask. If it's something that you purchase in the store, well, don't go back until the following season and purchase the next vintage.
Right. And so that's going to lead me into my next question is, what exactly is cork? And how do you know if it's corked?
Well, you get that smell.
That smell.
You get that wet dog
Wet
type of smell.
wet cardboard is how I always think of it. So if you take a box and you put it outside when it's raining, that corrugated cardboard, When it gets wet and it's all like yucky, if you smell that, that is the scent of
Hmm.
corked wine.
Yeah.
And it is a microorganism that causes it. It is TCA, which occurs, which just naturally occurs. And that does not mean that it's
Sweat
a bad wine.
socks. Yeah. Michael says sweat socks.
Sweat socks, yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Um, the cork does not equal technically unsound wine. Okay, technically unsound wine is high volatile acid. Or just unevenness of the wine. The acid is super high, the fruit's really low, or vice versa, or you can have wines that are really high in residual sugar, and you taste it and you're like, oh, right? That's technically unsound. You can have that same wine that has the high residual sugar, but the acid is also high, and it balances out and it tastes wonderful, like a Sauternes. Okay, that's technically sound. TCA is a technically sound wine that the cork was flawed. Okay, and what's the best thing, Deb? When you have a corked wine, what do you do?
I actually dump it.
But do you do any? Do you let the winery know?
Oh, I do. And also if it's something I bought in a store, I will bring it back to the store.
Yeah.
And of course, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat, you do get pushback from the store. But as long as you keep everything intact,
Yeah, you
it
can't
happens to be
you
actually,
can't dump it down the sink and then bring it back
yeah,
to the
no, but
store.
if that's just something, yeah, that's just something that, I ordered or whatever. But I actually ate at a restaurant, and I got a cork bottle, and I said to the server, this bottle is corked, and I got a lot of pushback.
Really?
Yeah, and then she brings it, and we ordered another bottle of something else, and then she goes, "Yeah, the bartender did taste it, and it was off."
Oh,
But I'm like, I shouldn't have been made to feel like shit.
no.
And it happens. It happens. And the bottle sitting next to the bottle that I had could have been fine. You
Yep.
know.
Yep.
So if you do get a bottle, don't be embarrassed to tell the server if you're at a restaurant that this bottle is corked, and don't be embarrassed to put the cork back in it and bring it to the liquor store, because they will get refunded from the supplier on it.
Right. So, absolutely, as a winery, I always want to know that you had a wine of mine that was
Yeah.
corked, because
And, yeah.
my goal as Gersina Wines, as a winery, is for you to enjoy my wine and for you to taste the best that I am producing. So, if you taste a wine and you send me an email that it's corked, we send you another bottle. Okay?
Yeah, I've had wine clubs that I have had a cork bottle, and I have let them know, and they sent me out another
Yeah,
bottle.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Because,
sometimes I said, don't bother wasting the postage,
right,
because I bought a case, and I know the other bottles were fine, this one wasn't. So
right.
it's just something that happens.
Yep. It is just something that happens, and every winery out there that is worth their salt is going to prefer for you to tell them that, because
Hmm.
I much prefer for you to call me and say this was off, and me to explain what cork is, and to send you another bottle where you can taste what my wine really is supposed to taste like, versus you thinking that that's what my wine is.
Right.
Okay, so that is absolutely, do not ever feel ashamed to send a bottle back.
No.
That is a very big different than I don't like. So if you're in a
Yes.
restaurant and you order a wine and it tastes off, then you send it back. If you order a wine and you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be,
That's
that
your wine.
that's on you. That's
Yeah.
on you.
Yeah.
Okay, that
There's
is on you.
distinct flavors, smells, aroma, everything about a cork bottle, so they will know.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I've done that. I was in New York with a group of friends. I ordered a Cote de Rhone, and that bottle came. and I pulled the cork, and on the first whiff of the wine, it it was corked. I knew it was corked,
Yeah.
and just turned around, brought the waiter back, said, "This is corked," and they just bring me another bottle.
Yeah.
That's it.
There shouldn't be an issue. It should be right away. Oh, okay. No problem.
Right. Yeah. And in going back to the cork, it used to be a lot more prevalent. It actually used to be at the 10% level of
Was it?
wines. Yep. Not a lot of people can, it's not really as common to detect it. Not everybody comprehends that that is a corked bottle. But a while ago, it used to be at a 10% failure rate for TCA. Now, with the new processes of how they produce the cork and how you clean the cork and how you do all that, it is actually down to under 1%. So it is kind of really rare that you're going to find a corked wine now. But yeah, it's at like the 1% now. So it's dropped quite a bit.
Oh, that's good.
Yes. All right. Michael say he had the same issue with the competition with his competition.
Yeah.
Gee, Michael, which wine was that?
Was it yours?
All right.
It happens. It happens.
Yep.
It's just it's a natural thing. Cork
Mm-hmm.
comes from a tree
Absolutely. Yep.
in
It
Portugal.
does.
Yep.
So you're up, Deb. What question you got?
I'm up. Okay. So, how is a wine vegan?
Oh God. I just went off on. I just went off on Clubhouse on this.
Oh, did you?
concept.
What were you on? What room were you in?
I don't even know, but. And
Oh, I remember you were telling me this.
Yes, yes. Okay, so by definition, like, how is a wine vegan? It's grapes. It's the constituents of grapes, right? So it is water, it is seed, it is skin, right? It's tannin, it's all of that. It's vegan. Where it becomes non-vegan is
Fining method.
is what?
The fining method.
The fining method. Okay. So, and this is where I went off because it wasn't so much the vegan aspect of it as people were very much, we should have a label deck for wine. Okay. Here's the thing. When I go to fine, I can put in isinglass, which is fish bladder. Okay. I do not eat any fish. Debbie can attest to the fact that no fish ever do I eat, ever. In fact, the smell of fish makes me nauseous. I drink my wine that's got isinglass in it, okay? Because it comes out when you fine. The whole purpose, the whole reason of fining is to collect those particles, right, that you don't want in the wine, and it drops. So I can use egg white, I can use the isinglass. It conglomerates into this fatter particle, and then that bigger particle drops down to the ground, and then it gets filtered out. So you are not drinking egg white. You are not drinking fish bladder, okay? It's a process that is used in order to pull out solubles out of the wine. That's all it does. And then it gets filtered out. So I have an issue with the vegan concept because, and technically, I get it, but it's not in the wine. So there's my little soapbox on that.
Okay.
Okay. Now the other realm, the label deck, that was where I really went off because people were saying that wineries and winemakers are trying to hide what they're doing. And that's why we don't want label decks. Okay. My response to that is the fact that what we have to go through legally to get a label is a little insane. Okay. They regulate the size of the font. They regulate what you can say, what you can't say, what the picture can be, what this, what that. And the minute I change my label, other than the vintage, I need to get that reapproved. Okay. So now take into account whether maybe this year, okay, I use egg white to find my Cab Franc, but next year I use isinglass, or I don't find it at all. That's a new label, and I've got to get it reapproved. Okay, that's why we don't want to do that. And then when you add the label deck, it's all in percentages. It's very thing. Now you're bringing in the FDA. You're bringing in a whole other regulating body. So now not only do I have to get approval by the TTB, I have to get approval by the FDA. We're not trying to hide anything. Okay, the wineries, artisan wineries, the majority of wineries, we're not putting anything in. There's nothing in that wine other than grapes. Okay.
Yeast.
And yes, but the yeast come out also.
Yeah, that comes out too.
That comes out also. You're not, unless you're drinking
Every now and then, tartrates in the bottle.
Right. Okay. So that's my thing against vegan or whatever is it's coming out of the wine. Yes, I might use an egg white, but you're not. If you're a vegan, it's all good. If you're a vegan because you don't want eggs being used, well, then I can't help you. I don't really know why why certain people are vegan. I don't eat meat. I don't eat fish because I don't like the taste of it. But you're not eating the egg white or the fish.
So Michael actually wrote, how about winery states food coloring dye used? I don't know any wineries that use food coloring.
Mega Purple? And you're talking about only the massive wineries that so going back to the original
mass produced,
right, going back to that original question of why does my Chardonnay taste this way this vintage and this way this vintage, without naming names, I'm sure everybody can think of a winery that is the same wine, vintage after vintage after vintage, the same color, vintage after vintage. There you go. They're using Mega Purple. They're doing other things that are making it the same thing because their customers are expecting that to be the same.
And those are the wines that don't change year after year.
Right.
You can expect the same taste, the same aromas, the same flavors,
right?
Regardless,
right?
And how they manipulate.
We're not saying names. Yes. All right. So my next question is pretty funny because we have one. What is meant by reserve?
I think that is dependent on the winery that's producing it. A reserve can mean something that is coming from a special area of the vineyard. It can be something that's coming from that special area of the vineyard and that's not blended with anything. It can mean a higher priced.
Usually does.
Yeah, but they either purchase the grapes a higher price. They come from like the premier, vineyard growing. They got the best rows in that vineyard. Have you? So they're sourcing grapes from this vineyard, and it's I want to use the Saltkill Vineyard in the Finger Lakes as an example, but that's a real sought after vineyard. So, grapes coming from them could have reserve on it for all I know. So that's what, I think it could be the winemaker special that they held a certain lot back that was extraordinary in their mind that they picked from the vineyard, and they call that reserve. That might taste different than the same grapes 3 rows down because you don't know about the soil, how the sun hits it, what have you.
Right. It is purely up to the winemaker to determine whether it is a reserve or not. There is no legal definition by what a reserve is, same as there is no legal definition of old vine. Uh, it's whatever that winemaker determines is old vine. It's whatever that winemaker determines is reserve. And I will share one of my all-time favorite stories of old vine. We were in Napa and we pulled up to this winery that is no longer there. And he actually was going through a divorce at that time and was losing the winery, whatever. But we pulled in, and here this man is, true farmer, dirt on the hands, got the pitchfork going, doing, or the rake or whatever, doing all that. And we come in and we're like, can we taste? He's like, yeah, come on. He opens up the barn and he gives it to us, and he pours the wine, and I go to taste it, and he's like, this is my old vine. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, what, and he's like, yeah, I planted these vines 2 days before I planted the vines. I loved this man immediately. And then the next wine he poured, he said it was his reserve. And, we were talking or whatever. And I told him, I was like, oh, it's a little bit tight. It's young. And he's like, oh, hold on. And with his pre-COVID, obviously, with his complete bare hand that has dirt all over it, he takes the wine glass, he puts his hand over my wine glass, does this, and says, now the reserve is aged 5 years.
That's great.
I adored this man. But yes, there is no legal definition of reserve. There's no legal definition of old vine, which is very different than vineyard designated, estate, or calling something an AVA. If you see an AVA on a label, if you see estate, if you see a county, something like that, those are legally defined things. Okay, to be a state, the wine has to come from that estate. Okay, to be a Cab Franc, it needs to be at least 75% Cabernet Franc. 25% of it can be anything else, but it must be 75%. Whatever that variety is. A reserve is what's special to that winemaker. So for us, it's a single clone, single vineyard. That's why we call it a reserve. Okay, but no legal definition. So complete marketing doesn't really mean it's better or worse. It's something special to the winemaker. No.
Yeah.
Yep. But that man, I loved him.
That he sounds great.
He was awesome. And I sat and I drank his wine right after his dirty old hand went all.
Because you didn't think twice about that. Now you think twice about just shaking someone's hand, for crying out loud.
I did look at Mike and go, huh, but okay, it's alcohol. All good.
Yeah.
All good.
Right. Right.
You got another one, Deb?
Do I have another one? Let's see here. I do. How does the different yeast affect the taste of the wine?
Excellent question. So yeast is a living organism, and just like, every living organism, has its own characteristics, so does yeast. So there are different yeasts. I'm going off of commercial.
So I'm thinking
yeast.
Different yeasts that I want to say extract, I might not be the right word, different aromas and flavors from the particular grape.
Right.
So it really depends on what the winemaker is trying to achieve with his wine.
Right. So we know that there's two different types, right? Two different types of winemaking process, right? We can use commercial yeast, or we can use indigenous wild yeast, right? Okay. So in the commercial yeast, I can go in and I can choose which yeast I want to use for different wines. So it's a different yeast for my Cab Franc than it is for my Chenin Blanc. My Chenin Blanc, I want tropical aromas. I want, flavors. I'm going to choose a different yeast, a yeast that is known to, when it goes through the fermentation process, that's what it does. Different yeast do different things at different alcohol levels. Okay, so yeast are very dependent on that alcohol level, and they shut down at a certain time. If I'm in a stuck fermentation, knock on wood, I don't get one. If I'm on a stuck fermentation, those yeast have shut down because the alcohol was too high. Let's say I need to put in a yeast that is like they're actually called super yeast, right? Because they can eat at that alcohol level. So depending on the wine situation, what aromas, what flavors you want to expend out of your wine or get out of your wine, you're going to choose what commercial yeast you want, and you're going to do that or combination of the yeast. So.
Yep, that's what I figured. So, do you have any more? Or?
I do. How much does temperature affect wine when you're drinking it?
Wow, it can, like, if you serve a white wine too cold, it's gonna stunt the flavors and aromas. You're gonna have to wait till that wine warms up a little bit before you start smelling the true aromas of the grape and before you taste the true flavors of the grape. And the same thing goes with red wine. And then I think with red wine, people, especially in the summer, red wine, and you have that bottle and it's sitting out. If it's out there too long, it kind of gets cooked. You're, if it's, in the sun, if it's in the area when you go to drink it, to me, it's, it's not room temperature anymore. It's whatever the sun's beating down on it. So you really want to be careful now that we're coming into the summer months and you're going to have those barbecues, no, do not put the red wine on ice. Just make sure it's in the shade. Make sure it's just not by the sun, because that will definitely affect the flavor. It almost gets, I don't know how to explain it. It just gets too warm and the flavors just like all blend together, and it's just like a hogwash of stuff where you don't get once again the true flavors. And then if you're pairing it with food at a barbecue, it's not going to complement it. It's not going to do what you meant it to do.
Right. And with red wine, if you serve it too cold, it actually brings out more of that tannin, that sandpapery thing, which a lot of people who are just getting into red wine don't really understand and don't really like. And that, they're like, oh, I don't like this. When it's colder, you're going to get more of that bitterness, more of that tannic structure. So that's not good. And then if it's too warm, it's just everything is just muted. And you're not getting it. It's not, honestly, drink it however you want to drink it, but you're not getting the true expression of the wine if it's not at the proper serving temperature.
Yeah, and the whites too, sometimes you're just going to need to let it sit, and you're going to need to wrap your hands around the glass and go like this just to get it, so that it comes out of its shock.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Yes. Absolutely. So I have another question.
Okay.
Do you have another one? Since I went.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. So in relation to water, okay, right? So like we were asked, how does a consumer know what they're drinking water-wise versus wine-wise? Okay. And it's you're not really drinking water when you're thinking of that it's watery versus more of a full bodied. So you're talking a thin wine, okay, versus a full bodied wine. That all has to do with the extraction of the wine. So it deals with the wine making process. What is the acidity level? What is the tannin level? That type of thing. You're not adding water to the wine per se.
And it could be the question, and I'm just going to use the hurricane issue, where the grapes fill up with water, and they make wine from that. It's going to
It's gonna
feel like
be
a more
thinner.
diluted Chardonnay or whatever the case of the wine is, than if it hadn't rained buckets, a week before they picked it.
Right. Yeah. So it's all, yeah, that's why we rush to harvest if there's a storm coming in. You're
Hmm.
going to have a thinner mouthfeel to that wine. But it's all in that winemaking process. It's all, what's that acidity level, the tannin level. How much extraction was there? How much did the wine sit on the grape skins? And honestly, what is the variety? Some varieties just lend themselves to be thinner wines than other varieties. But if you're comparing that same variety to that same variety, it's the winemaking process.
Yeah. So we had some good questions.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
I still have I have more, Deb.
I do too, but it's 10 of 9 here.
All right. I want to ask this last question because I get this a
Oh,
lot.
Heather said muddled.
Muddled, yeah, yeah. So, um, how do you get strawberries, cherries, blueberries? How does that get in the wine?
It's all the flavor compounds of the grape. I mean, all grapes are different, just like you and I are different. And it goes to the yeast on what the winemaker wants to extract from the wine, and also the age of the wine, because
Mm.
as the wine ages, and then you have your different flavors that you're getting from the barrel. Hold on, I just swallowed the wrong way. you know, the different flavors that you're getting from the barrel all come into play if it's barrel fermented. So there's a lot of different things that are added to. I don't want to say added to the wine. That's the wrong word.
Right.
That's the wrong
That's
terminology.
exactly it. Is not added.
there's,
It is
there's a
not added.
lot of my mind is going blank, but there's a lot of things that contribute to the flavor of the wine. Being you have that grape, and what do you do with that grape? You're going to add XYZ yeast. What does that yeast bring out in the grape? Then you're going to put that grape in the barrel. And what does that do? And then you're going to have that finished wine. As it ages, where I might drink it after 2 years, you might drink it after 7. It's going to have a completely different taste, because as the wine ages, just like a person ages, different things happen to them. And, you know, you might get now more stewed fruits, or, different types of things that happen.
Right.
You
So
want to add to that?
yeah, just nothing is added. We don't add
No,
blueberries or
there's
blueberry
nothing added.
flavors. It comes from the soil. It comes from the life cycle of the grape, and it comes from the processing of the grape. And if
It also comes from the air, because you get
yep,
the salinity from the ocean. You
right.
get the minerality from the soil.
That's terroir.
Yeah.
That's terroir. Okay, that's where you're getting those flavors from. That's where you're getting that. And going back, we'll end this with the very first question of the WSET. That's something that you learn in the CSW and you learn in
Hmm.
WSET in terms of primary, secondary, and tertiary flavors and
Hmm.
what that means, and the you know the primary versus secondary, the winemaker style. The tertiary is like as it ages,
Ages.
that primary, the fruit, and all of that stuff. So, yes, that is terroir. Okay. We don't, unless you're drinking a blueberry wine, we're not adding blueberries or strawberries or whatever. That's terroir.
It all comes from the fruit.
Yep.
It all comes from
Yes.
that little grape on
That
that.
little grape and the environment it's grown in.
That's right.
But yes,
So,
so it is 5 minutes before
yeah.
wrap up, and I am thrilled, excited, so excited for Debbie to share what we're doing next month on Wine for Bet Street.
Next month it is Riesling, and we have Stu from Smith Madrone Winery coming on, and I am just like so excited. I mean, his wines, his Riesling is
I,
incredible.
I have no qualms of saying it is my favorite American Riesling,
It is.
without a doubt.
It is elegant. It is. It's got pizzazz. It is just. I have had his Riesling before. I think it was like 2 years ago, and I had it at the pool at the marina, and I was just like floored.
It is, in my opinion,
It is.
Alsace. It is Alsace in
Yes.
California. It is incredible. And not only is his wines incredible, but Stu is, to say he's a character is an understatement. I adore this
I
man.
can't wait to meet him. I have not met him. I've had just conversations with him on Instagram. It's like great, you know?
I adore him, and he will tell you how it is. And so R is for Riesling next month, and Debbie will have the link.
Oh, I don't have the link
No,
here.
I didn't mean in the chat, but Debbie will have the link up.
The link is up on the website. It's on winefabetstreet.com. So you can go there and register for it.
Absolutely. And
So,
if
and I
you,
can't wait till we can travel again because that's definitely a winery I'm going to go visit.
right. And if you want to place an order, they just did, for the first time, they did a vertical that you can purchase a vertical. I don't know if it's still available, but
That'd be pretty awesome.
if you want to taste along with us and Stu, go to Smith Madrone Winery and purchase a bottle. I have to, and I don't say, you know this, I don't say this very
Yeah.
frequently. I don't think you'll be disappointed.
No, I don't think so either.
So,
And I'm looking really forward to it.
absolutely.
So,
Thank you everybody for
yes,
joining
thank
in
you.
and for sending in the questions. This was a very different
That
Wine
was
for Main
great.
Street, but a fun one. And I hope we answered all of your questions. If you have a question that we didn't answer, please feel free to send us an email. At exploringthewineglass@gmail.com or hvwinegoddess at gmail.
Yeah.
And we'll answer it. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
It's all about fun, education, and making wine more approachable to you.
That's right. So, guys, have a great week, and we'll see you next month.
Lunch
Cheers.
up!